The rooftop smelled of cedar and money. That was the first thing Nathaniel Holt noticed when he stepped through the glass doors onto the 42nd floor terrace of the Callaway Tower. The dense, polished scent of wealth arranged carefully over the city, the way expensive rooms always tried to pretend they hadn't been built by ordinary hands. He adjusted the collar of his dress shirt. It was the one his sister had pressed for him the night before, hunting through his closet with the exasperated efficiency of a woman who knew he owned exactly 2 button-downs that still had all their buttons. He was grateful for it now around him. The crowd moved in the slow, deliberate way of people who understood they were being observed. Callaway Dynamics hosted the Meridian Foundation Gala every summer. The charity supported STEM education in underserved school districts, a cause Nathaniel believed in genuinely. Though he had come tonight not as a believer, but as a contractor, he was 3 weeks into a facilities upgrade contract, rewiring the backup power systems on the building's lower floors. He'd been invited by the project coordinator as a courtesy. He hadn't expected to come. Then his daughter had found the invitation on the kitchen table. "Dad, it says rooftop." Lily had looked up at him with the particular gravity of a 7-year-old who has identified something important. "We've never been to a rooftop." And so, here they were. Lily stood beside him now, wearing a yellow dress that had been white until an encounter with a felt tip marker 3 months ago. The stain, shaped vaguely like a tulip, had been elevated by his sister's quick thinking into a deliberate design. Lily wore it with the confidence of someone who had always known the dress was supposed to look exactly this way. She was taking in the crowd with the focused attention she brought to everything, the careful cataloging gaze that Nathaniel recognized as something she had not inherited from him. He was a man of motion. Lily was a girl of observation. She watched before she moved. The gala's guest of honor stood near the eastern railing, half turned toward the city skyline. Nathaniel had seen Carolyn Ashford's photograph on the project briefing documents. She was the CEO of Callaway Dynamics, founder of the Meridian Foundation, and by most accounts, the most formidable person in a room that had no shortage of formidable people. In the photograph, she had seemed composed and distant, the way executives often looked when they were posing for something they wished was already over. In person, she was more precise than that. She wore navy with clean lines. Her dark hair was pulled back without ceremony. She was speaking to 2 men from the foundation's board, her posture attentive and slightly closed, the body language of someone who was listening, and simultaneously somewhere else entirely. Nathaniel reached for Lily's hand on instinct. She had already let go and taken 3 steps toward the lemonade stand. "Stay where I can see you," he said, not loudly. Lily raised one hand in acknowledgement without turning around. He watched her pour herself a cup, study the surface of the liquid for a moment, the way she studied everything, and then drift with the unmistakable casualness of a child who has already decided where she is going toward the eastern railing. Toward Carolyn Ashford, Nathaniel moved. Not fast enough. He reached the railing in time to hear his daughter say, in the perfectly clear, perfectly earnest voice she used when she had decided something mattered, "My dad says, you used to smile like that." In pictures, the 2 board members had gone quiet. Carolyn Ashford had turned from the skyline and was looking down at Lily with an expression Nathaniel could not immediately read. Something had moved through it quickly. Surprise, maybe, or something older than surprise. And then the composure had settled back into place like water closing over a stone. "What pictures?" Carolyn asked. Her voice was measured, careful, from the hospital. Lily held her lemonade with both hands. "There's a picture in a frame at our house. A lady smiling at a camera in a hallway. Dad says she looked kind." One of the board members, an older man named Garrett Winslow, who sat on 3 foundation boards and had attended every gala since. The first one leaned slightly toward the other and said, "Almost not at all. Remarkable resemblance." It was the kind of comment that spreads. It moved through the nearby cluster of guests, the way weather moves not seen. Only felt until suddenly the air has changed. 3 people turned. Then 5 eyes moved between the little girl in the yellow dress and the woman in navy by the railing. The same dark eyes, the same angle of the jaw, the same slight tilt of the head when uncertain. The resemblance was not absolute. It was the kind that required a second look and then refused to let go. Nathaniel arrived at his daughter's side. "Lily, Dad." She looked up at him. "I told her about the picture." Carolyn Ashford raised her eyes to his. She was not quite his height. Her composure was intact. but something underneath it was working hard. "I've never seen your daughter before," she said. The statement came out organized and controlled. "I don't know what picture she's referring to." "I know," Nathaniel said. "Then you should explain." "I can." He met her gaze steadily. Around them, the crowd had developed the particular stillness of people pretending not to watch something they very much intended to watch, but not hear. He paused. "There are things you may have forgotten, Miss Ashford, not because of carelessness. I think you just never knew the end of the story." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What story?" He looked at his daughter, who was studying the lemon pulp at the bottom of her cup with her full attention. He looked back at Carolyn, the one that began 8 years ago. He said, "In June at a clinic in Harrowfield 8 years before, Carolyn Ashford had been 29 years old, mid-MBA, and broke in the specific way that people are broke when they are spending every available dollar on becoming something. She had been sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with a woman named Priscilla, who waitressed nights and studied environmental law during the day, and who had a gift for finding ways to make rent that did not involve asking anyone for anything. It was Priscilla who had clipped the ad from the weekly health circular and left it on the kitchen counter without comment. Egg donation, anonymous compensation for qualified donors. Caroline had read it 3 times. Then she had called. She had done her research, the way she did research on everything, methodically and without sentiment. She understood the process. She understood the anonymity. She understood that she would sign papers ensuring she would have no legal relationship to any child born from the donation, and she had signed them with a clear hand. She had needed the money. She had also, in some quieter part of herself that she did not examine very often, wanted to do something that mattered during those years when mattering felt very far away. The clinic was small and clean, staffed by people who were professional and kind. She had gone 3 times. The final appointment was on the 14th of June. The clinic coordinator, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s, had told her the donation cycle was complete and thanked her with a warmth that seemed genuine. There had been a photograph, a standard donor file photograph, in the corridor outside the lab. Caroline had smiled because someone had asked her to. She had never thought about it again. Or rather, she had thought about it the way you think about a decision you have made cleanly and closed behind you. It was not something she revisited. There was nothing she had told herself to revisit it. There was nothing she had told herself to revisit. She had not known about Elena Ho. Elena had been 33 when she and Nathaniel began the IVF process. They had tried for 2 years on their own and then for another year with medical support before a specialist at Harrowfield Fertility Center had suggested donor eggs. Helena had been reluctant at first, not from vanity, Nathaniel always said, but because she felt she was asking too much of someone she would never be able to thank. Eventually, she had agreed. They had reviewed the anonymous donor profiles carefully, choosing not on statistics alone, but on the small human details the profiles allowed. A love of building things, a habit of reading until very late, a photograph in a hospital corridor of a woman smiling at a camera in a way that looked honest. Lily had been born in the spring. She had come out healthy and loud and already looking, as Nathaniel's mother had said, with a mixture of wonder and something close to relief, like she knew exactly what she was doing here. Elena had lived to see Lily's 3rd birthday. The cancer had been diagnosed 6 months after Lily was born, caught at a stage that allowed them time, but not enough of it. She had died on a Thursday in October at home with Nathaniel beside her. She had made him promise, among other things, not to spend the rest of his life looking backward. He had kept the photograph because Lily had asked about it once, very young, with the instinctive curiosity of a child who senses there is a shape to a story, even when she cannot yet read the words. He had told her only what was true, that there had been a kind woman who had helped them, and that without her, Lily would not exist. Lily had accepted this with the equanimity of a person for whom the fact of her own existence was interesting but not troubling. Nathaniel had never tried to find the donor. It was anonymous. It was supposed to stay that way. He had not come to this rooftop to find anyone, but he had brought in the inside pocket of his dress shirt a folded envelope, because there were things that deserved to be said, even when saying them required more courage than most people kept ready. They found a quiet corner of the terrace near the service corridor, away from the catering tables and the cluster of board members who were still, with varying degrees of subtlety, watching. Lily had been delivered to the lemonade stand with 2 cookies and a directive to stay within sight, which she honored with the comfortable confidence of a child who has always known she will not be forgotten. Nathaniel drew the envelope from his pocket. He held it for a moment before placing it on the small table between them. "I'm not here to make a claim," he said. "I want to be clear about that before anything else. That's not what this is." Caroline looked at the envelope. She did not reach for it. "What is it?" "Medical records from Hurrahfield Fertility Center 8 years ago. Donor file cross-referenced with the donor profile my wife and I selected." He kept his voice level. It had taken him 2 weeks to decide to bring it, and another week to decide to bring it, and another week to decide not to say any of this in front of Lily. "Your photograph was in the donor profile, not identified by name. They don't include names, but there aren't many people in this city who look like you and donated at that clinic in that window." She was very still. He had expected something anger, denial, the quick, defensive posture of someone protective. And J boundary they believed was legal and final. Instead, she was just still, the way water is still when something has just passed through it. "The donation was anonymous," she said. "Yes, I signed papers. Yes, I know. Lily has no legal claim to you, and I'm not here to suggest otherwise." He watched her face. "She doesn't even know I brought this. She knows the story in the way a 7-year-old understands it, that there was someone who helped, that it was an act of generosity, and that she should feel grateful rather than troubled. That's the way my wife wanted her to understand it." The name of his wife sat between them for a moment. "Elena," he said, because it deserved to be said aloud. Her name was Elena. She died 4 years ago. Something moved through Carolyn's expression. Not grief, exactly. She had not known Elena, but something adjacent to it. The kind of feeling that comes when you understand for the first time that a story you thought was closed had been continuing in other rooms without you. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, not sharp. Genuinely asking because Lily found the photograph 6 months ago. The real one, the original, the one from the donor file that my wife kept in a box in the closet. She brought it to me and asked if it was someone who had known us. He paused. "I told her the truth, a kind version of it. But she's 7 and she's very smart and she's going to keep asking questions as she gets older. I didn't want the answer when she's old enough to fully understand it to be that I knew who you were and kept it from her. You could have left it alone." "Yes," he said. "I could have." She picked up the envelope. She held it the way she held difficult things. She held it the way she held difficult things. Not tightly, not loosely, but with the particular grip of someone who understands that the weight of a thing is not always in its size. She did not open it. "I remember the clinic," she said, finally, quiet. "I remember the photograph," he nodded. "I didn't think she stopped. Started again. It wasn't something I thought about afterward." "I know it doesn't sound like anything," Nathaniel said. "You did what you set out to do. The story didn't end there for you. It just kept going somewhere else." Carolyn did not go back to the board members. She stood at the small corner table for a long time after Nathaniel returned to his daughter, the envelope in her hands, the noise of the gala moving around her like water around something fixed. She thought about Elena Hull, whom she had never met, who had chosen a photograph in a clinic corridor as the beginning of a child. She thought about what it meant to choose something based on nothing more than an expression in a photograph, a smile that looked honest. She thought about Nathaniel Holt, who had carried that information in an envelope inside his dress shirt and come to a charity gala on a rooftop because he believed the right thing was not always the easy thing. She thought about herself 8 years ago, in a kitchen with a circled ad on the counter. She had told herself then that it was practical, the compensation was real, and she had needed it. She had told herself that the anonymity was a kindness that a child, if one resulted, was better off not knowing. She had believed it fully, the way you believe things when the believing is convenient. She was not sure she believed it now. Her foundation's director of communications, a sharp-tempered woman named Bridget Calloway who shared neither Carolyn's last name nor her capacity for silence, found her by the service corridor at 7. "The board is asking questions," Bridget said in the specific tone she used when questions were already answers. Winslow saw the whole thing. "He's been talking." "I know, Carolyn." Brigitte lowered her voice. "If this becomes a story, an egg donation, a chill, do who looks like you, a single father who showed up at your gala, then it becomes a story," Carolyn said. Bright blinked. This was not the answer she had prepared for. "Our PR team needs to get ahead of it. We can frame it as a misunderstanding, or issue a brief statement about the Foundation's privacy policies. The man came here because he wanted his daughter to know the truth when she's old enough to ask for it. Carolyn said he didn't come here to harm me or embarrass this organization. He came because he has been raising a child alone for 4 years, and he believes in honesty, even when it's inconvenient. She set the envelope on the table. I'm not going to frame that as a misunderstanding. The board can wait, she said it without heat, which was somehow more final than if she had said it with any. This is my foundation, and my decision, and I am going to decide it the right way. Brietta left. Caroline stood alone in the corner for a few moments, aware of the noise behind her, the gathered and expectant energy of an event that had developed over the last hour, a new center of gravity. Then she went to find Lily. The girl was sitting on a low bench near the lemonade stand, holding a paper napkin. She had folded into something that might have been a boat, or might have been a bird. She looked up when Carolyn approached with the calm and alert attention of someone who had been expecting her. "Hi," Lily said. "Hello." Carolyn sat down beside her, not across from her beside her. "What did you make?" Lily considered the napkin. "I'm not sure yet. It depends on what it wants to be." Caroline looked at the girl beside her, really looked without the overlay of shock or calculation, and felt something she had not expected, a recognition that was not about features or genetics, or the resemblance that was not about features or genetics, or the resemblance that strangers had noticed. It was something simpler and more unnerving than that. It was the specific feeling of understanding for the first time. That something you thought had ended had only changed shape. The board convened in a side room off the main terrace at 8 o'clock. Garrett Winslow had called it, which was within his authority as board chair of the foundation, though not Carolyn, noted within the spirit of a charity gala he had attended until now as a guest. There were 5 of them around the table. Winslow, 2 other board members, the foundation's general counsel, and Brigitta. Carolyn sat at the head of the table and looked at them with the expression she used when she needed people to understand that a conversation was going to go the way she intended it to go. "This is a private matter," Winslow said. He was not unkind, but he had the manner of a man who had spent many years making difficult things sound procedural. Any legal or financial exposure needs to be assessed before you make any statements. There's no legal exposure. Carolyn said, "The donation was anonymous and the anonymity holds. The clinic's records are sealed. The man who spoke to me did so privately and has no intention of going to anyone. You can't know that. I can evaluate it. I've been evaluating people for 20 years. She looked at the council. The foundation's mission is educational equity for children in underserved communities. A contractor in this building came here tonight with his daughter because she won a scholarship from this foundation's elementary school program. That's the story. If anyone attempts to make it something else, we can address that. Then the resemblance is notable and personal and mine to address." She let the silence hold for a moment. "I will be making a brief statement at the close of the evening. Not a denial, not an apology, and not a deflection. I will say what is true in the way I choose to say it. If any of you feel that is incompatible with your role on this board, I would encourage you to tell me that directly." No one told her directly. The council began to say something about liability. Carolyn listened to it and understood that his concern was genuine and procedural and already irrelevant. The envelope was in her pocket now. She had read the documents in the service corridor in the 15 minutes between talking to Lily and walking into this room. The records were clear. The dates matched. The donor profile number matched the file number. Her own records, kept in a box she had not opened in 8 years, would confirm she knew who she was. She had always known. She had just never known where the story went. Outside the side room, through the glass that looked onto the terrace, she could see Nathaniel standing by the railing where she had been standing at the beginning of the evening. He was watching the city. Lily was beside him, her hand in his, pointing at something in the skyline with the authority of a person who is identified, something important. Carolyn watched them for a moment before she turned back to the board. "We're done here," she said. The storm came the way summer storms come in this part of the country without adequate announcement, turning the warm and golden air suddenly cool, pressing the smell of rain against the city's face before the first drop fell. The catering staff began moving quickly. Guests shifted toward the covered portion of the terrace, or pressed back through the glass doors into the building. Someone laughed at the sky. Someone else said this was typical. Absolutely typical. And you would think after 30 years in this city they would know to check the weather. Carolyn stood where she was. The rain came in stages. Cared where she was. The rain came in stages. First a scattered few drops, then a longer pause, then all at once. By the time it arrived fully, most of the terrace had emptied under the overhang or inside. The catering tables were being managed with practiced competence. The podium at the east end of the terrace, where the evening's final remarks were scheduled, had been covered in waterproof canvas. She was not looking at any of this. She was watching Nathaniel Holt and his daughter. They had not moved to the overhang. Instead, Nathaniel had taken off his jacket, the blue one, the one he had been wearing all evening, and which was clearly not waterproof, and draped it over Lily's head and shoulders without comment. He crouched beside her to make it fit better. Lily held the jacket in place with both hands, and looked up at the rain with the absorbed, almost scientific interest of someone observing a phenomenon she has always wanted to see more closely. He was getting soaked. He did not appear to have any particular feelings about it. Carolyn walked across the terrace. She arrived beside them, and Nathaniel looked up from his crouch. He registered her presence without surprise, which she was beginning to understand was simply how he was a person, for whom what arrived in front of him was what was there, and who responded to what was there without requiring extra time to process it. "You should be undercover," he said. "So should you." He acknowledged this with a slight inclination of his head and no change in his position. Lily looked up at her from under the jacket. "It's raining," she said. This was not an observation made for the purpose of informing anyone. It was the kind of statement a person makes when they want to share that they are happy. "I know," Carolyn said. She looked at Nathaniel. The rain was running down the side of his face. His shirt was translucent at the shoulders. He had the unhurried quality of a person who had long ago decided that certain things were worth being uncomfortable for. "What do you want from this?" she asked. Not unkindly, she needed to know. Will and she had decided she was done asking questions indirectly. "From telling me from tonight? What outcome were you hoping for?" He thought about it. She appreciated that he actually thought about it, rather than producing the answer he had prepared. "Nothing financial," he said. "I want to be clear about that. We're fine, I work. She's got her scholarship. We manage." He glanced at Lily, who was tracking a rivulet of water along the terrace floor with the focus of a scientist following a variable. "She's going to grow up and she's going to have questions, smart questions. And I'd rather she know that those questions have honest answers than grow up with a door I'm not willing to open for her. And if the answers are complicated, she can handle complicated. She can handle complicated." He said it with a simplicity that was entirely free of boast, just a fact he had established over 7 years of paying attention. "I just wanted you to know she exists and that she's—" He paused, and Carolyn watched him find the word with care. "She's doing really well." The rain eased slightly. The overhang crowd was watching them. She could feel it without looking. There was a microphone waiting on a podium under a waterproof cover at the far end of the terrace. She made her decision. The podium was still wet when she stepped up to it. Someone had removed the canvas cover, and someone else had placed a towel on the microphone stand, which she moved aside. The terrace was not as full as it had been before the rain, but there were still 60 or 70 people arranged under the overhang and along the walls, and they went quiet with the practiced speed of an audience that has been waiting for something to happen. She looked at them. She was also wet. The thought arrived, and she let it arrive, without adding to it. She was the CEO of a publicly traded company, and the founder of an educational nonprofit, and she was standing at a podium on a rooftop in the rain with mascara that she was reasonably certain had made its way down her face, and none of that changed what she was about to say. 12 years ago, she said, and the microphone caught her voice cleanly, "I was a graduate student with a great deal of ambition and a checking account that was significantly more aspirational than factual. I made a decision that I believed at the time was both practical and anonymous. I donated eggs through a clinic in this city. I signed papers that removed me from whatever came next. And then I moved on the way you move on from a door you've closed, because you believe closing it was the right thing." The crowd was very still. "I was wrong about the door being closed," she said. "Not legally. Legally, it is what it was. But this evening, a man named Nathaniel Holt came to this gala with his daughter Lily, who is 7 years old and who is here on a scholarship from this foundation. And Lily's resemblance to me," as she paused for a fraction of a second, "not coincidental." She let it settle. "I am not Lily's mother. Elena Hull was Lily's mother, and Elena died 4 years ago, and she raised Lily with the same care and intention that any parent raises a child who was waited for and wanted. Nathaniel has continued that he came here tonight not to make a claim and not to cause harm. He came here because he believes, and I have come in the last 2 hours to agree with him, that the truth told honestly and in the right spirit is always more humane than the silence that protects our comfort. She looked at Winslow, who had the expression of a man recalibrating. The Meridian Foundation exists because I believe that every child deserves access to the education and opportunity that allows them to become who they are. I have just spent an evening being reminded that principles mean nothing if you only apply them when they're convenient. She'll probably only apply them. She fend. Okid at the microphone, stand for a moment, then back at the crowd. Lily Hole is the reason this foundation matters to me now, more than it ever has. Not because of genetics, because she is exactly the kind of child we built this for. Curious, capable, and already planning at the age of 7 to become an engineer. Someone in the back began to applaud. It was a single pair of hands, and then it was not. She did not look at Nathaniel. She was not doing this for him to see. She was doing it because it was what she should do. And she had arrived in the last 2 hours at the place where what she should do, and she had arrived in the last 2 hours at the place where what she should do and what she was willing to do had finally aligned. After the board members had found their coats and Brigitte had revised with notable speed her assessment of the evening's outcome, after the catering company had folded its tables and the city had resumed its late summer dark, Carolyn found Lily in the small waiting area by the elevator bank. Nathaniel was a few feet away talking to the project coordinator who had invited him, the conversation having the comfortable texture of two people who know each other primarily through work and are discovering in this context that they are also simply people. He glanced over. Carolyn gave him the small, deliberate nod that means I would like a few minutes. He returned it, a slight tilt of the chin that meant take them. A slight tilt of the chin that meant take them. She sat down beside Lily. The girl was drawing on the back of a gala program with a pen she had obtained from somewhere. Caroline suspected the foundation's reception table, where pens were left out for signatures and tended to migrate. She was drawing something that had too many angles to be a house, and too many windows to be a house, and too many windows to be a car. What is that? Carolyn asked. A building, Lily said, with a rooftop. She added a small rectangle to the top for Gallus. It's very detailed. I'm going to be an engineer. Illy said this with the certainty of someone reporting a fact about the physical world like my dad, but for buildings, not electricity. Although electricity is in buildings, so maybe both. That's a good approach, Carolyn said. Cover your options. Lily looked up at her with a direct, unhurried gaze that Carolyn was beginning to recognize as this child's particular mode of attention. She looked at you as though she had all the time she needed, which somehow made you feel you did too. Did you mean what you said? Lily asked in the speech. Yes. Daddy says you should only say things you mean. She returned to her drawing. He also says sometimes you have to practice meaning them first. Carolyn was quiet for a moment. Your dad is right about that. Are you going to keep knowing us? Lily asked. The question was entirely conversational. She had moved on to drawing a flag on the rooftop of her building, but it landed with the specific gravity of a question that a child has been thinking about for longer than the conversation suggests. Yes, Carolyn said. She felt the word as she said it, its weight and its meaning and its implication. If that's something you and your dad want, I think so. Lily considered the flag. What's your favorite color? Blue. Mine too, but also yellow. She indicated her dress. Obviously, Caroline looked at the girl beside her, 7 years old, drawing a building on the back of a charity program, already certain of her future and comfortable with strangers and grieving, in the quiet, functional way that children grieve who have been given the right tools, the absence of someone she had known and lost and would spend her whole life remembering. My dad calls me his best decision, Lily said, not looking up from her drawing, even though he didn't make me, not exactly. He says the deciding part is in the keeping. Carolyn could not immediately speak. Lily added a doo-doo, ride to the building. Then she looked up with the specific focus of someone who has reached the end of a thought and is ready to share it. You can be Summer, Mom, she said, if you want, because that's when we met. And because you look like Summer, she tilted her head. Is that okay? Yes, Carolyn said. Her voice was steady. That's okay. The following June, the Meridian Foundation announced a new fellowship program. The Elena Holt STEM Scholarship designed for children of single parents in underserved school districts. The announcement was made at a press conference that Carolyn had not initially intended to attend in person and then had realized she wanted to. The program was Nathaniel's idea, or rather, it had emerged from a conversation they had in the Foundation's conference room in March, when he had come in to review the second phase of the building's electrical upgrade, and had mentioned in the unhurried way he mentioned things he believed mattered, that his wife had worried about other parents like him, people doing it alone, managing the logistics of both earning and raising, and somehow still believing in the future their children were growing toward. Carolyn had listened. Then she had called her director of programs. She and Nathaniel were not in love. She thought about this occasionally without anxiety, the way you think about a fact of geography, simply acknowledging where you are. They were something that did not have a simple name. Two people who had been connected without knowing it by an act of generosity and an act of loss, and who had arrived separately and then together at a form of care that was quieter and steadier than romance, and she suspected more durable. He brought Lily to the Foundation's summer science fair in July. Lily's project, a model demonstrating load distribution in suspension bridges, built from materials that included 2 rulers, a significa, not amount of dental floss, and several pieces of what Nathaniel had described as repurposed electrical wire, technically still good, won first place in the 7 to 10 age group. The award was presented by Carolyn. She had not planned it that way. She simply happened to be the person who picked up the award card and walked to the table where Lily was standing beside her project, with the composed pride of someone who knew it was good work and had been willing to wait for that to be confirmed. "Lily, halt," Carolyn said. "That's me." Lily said the audience, which was the particular audience of a school district science fair, parents and teachers and administrators, and a handful of Foundation board members who had been persuaded to attend, laughed with the warm, involuntary laughter of people who have been disarmed by something honest. Carolyn handed her the certificate. Lily took it with both hands, looked at it seriously for a moment, and then looked up. "Thank you, Summer Mom," she said, not loudly, just clearly. Later, outside in the parking lot, Nathaniel was loading the bridge model into the back of his truck with the methodical care of a man who has transported many fragile things. Carolyn stood on the sidewalk with Lily, who was holding the certificate and a foil balloon that one of the teachers had given her, and which was having strong opinions about the wind direction. "She said it in front of everyone," Carolyn said. "She says what she means. He closed the tailgate, always has." Carolyn looked at the balloon, fighting the wind in Lily's grip, and then at the parking lot filling slowly with departing families, and then at the sky, which was that particular depth of blue that only happens in June when the light is long and the air has not yet hardened into full summer heat. "I used to think the decision I made in that clinic was a closed chapter," she said, "something that happened and then was over." And now she thought about Elena Hole, who had kept a photograph because it looked kind. She thought about Nathaniel, who had carried an envelope inside his dress shirt to a rooftop because he believed honesty was worth the difficulty. She thought about Lily, who had walked up to a stranger at a charity gala and offered her a name, Summer Mom, because she had been raised by someone who taught her that the people who help you are worth acknowledging, and that gratitude is not weakness, but the specific form of courage that recognizes a gift. "Now, I think there are decisions we make that we believe are finished," she said. "And then there are the ones that keep becoming something. The difference isn't in the deciding, it's in whether you're willing to keep watching." Nathaniel leaned against the truck and looked at her with a steady, unhurried attention. That was simply how he looked at things. "That's a good way to put it. I had a lot of time to think about it." Lily appeared between them, balloon in one hand, certificate in the other, the wind doing significant things to her hair. She looked at her father, then at Carolyn, then at the sky with the sequential attention of someone taking inventory. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. Nathaniel looked at Carolyn. Carolyn looked at Nathaniel. "Yes," they said at slightly different moments, which was close enough. Lily turned toward the parking lot exit, with the confidence of someone whose question has been answered and whose afternoon is now organized. The balloon pulled northeast. She corrected for it without looking. Above the city, the June sky held its color for another hour. The kind of blue that makes you believe, if you are standing in the right light and the right company, that some things that were supposed to be finished have only just begun.